Stop approaching. Ooh, can't spend your air dodge like that. Good games. All right. Who's ready for some content? Some content react. Now, for this content react, I am going to have to, I think, turn off the music. No, do not add that to the bookmarks bar. I want you to open a new thing with it here. Okay, yes, thank you. Very cool. Nice. And now, where's the React Andy window? There it is. Oh yeah, you guys can see that pretty good. So I saw this video and thought it would be interesting. McKinsey, the group secretly running every company and government, question mark? Let's go for more perfect union. 268,000 views in just a week. More people care. Other people care too. That's crazy.
I'm entering the global headquarters of one of the most influential companies in the world. But you probably wouldn't know that because hiding in plain sight is kind of their thing.
Oh yeah.
And from the shadows, they've been doing the dirty work for basically every brand you've ever heard of. Like 450 of the Fortune 500 companies. I'm talking big soda, big tobacco, big oil, and the very worst of big pharma. They've been called the single greatest legitimizer of mass layoffs of anyone, anywhere, at any time in modern history. They also work for the Saudi, Chinese, and American governments. And on whatever the hell this...
I'm playing both sides, so I always come out on top. Sorry, Blue Falcon, for pausing. That must have been you really confused. That must have made you kind of confused. I did not mean to, I promise. But yeah, a lot of companies have those kinds of relationships with governments. You know how there are a lot of political discourses and stuff, a lot of political topics that revolve around, oh, X versus Y country, America and China are competing and they have separate interests. Not really. At the end of the day, every country that's a nation state is just acting on behalf of business interests. And a lot of the time, that leads to countries that would otherwise be foreign adversaries doing very, very similar things. You know, companies do not discriminate with which governments they work with. The only thing that they care about is money. And if they can get that money, they'll do whatever. You know, so that's how you get companies working simultaneously with America, China, and Saudi Arabia. You may have noticed that, like, the whole made in China meme, that's because American companies operate in China. America just is racist, so it doesn't like when Chinese companies operate here and whatever. But yeah, I don't want to get too far into the sauce just yet. There's way more to this video. And I'll have other stuff to say about it in a second. I watched a couple minutes of this before I decided that, like, oh, this would be definitely worth showing. But I have not seen the full thing, so this is not, like, pre-watched or whatever.
This is.
At least not beyond a point.
Home to 9 million residents and organized
in
3 dimensions.
So who are they?
McKinsey's now accused
nice
of
meme.
helping drug makers to quote-unquote turbocharge the sales of prescription opioids.
Oh boy.
President Vladimir Putin's war machine against Ukraine sits Rostec, until recently a client of McKinsey and Company.
You worked for a company that was fixing bread prices.
No. I worked for a consulting company that had a client.
Well then, okay, so already McKinsey, this consulting group, has been involved in various price-fixing scandals, from medicine to food, and they've also been supplying, they've been playing both sides of ongoing wars, which is pretty wild.
That may have been involved in fixing, or what was apparently in a scandal.
Today, we're talking
Pete
about
Buttigieg.
McKinsey.
By the way, that guy that you saw, that guy that was talking, that is Pete Buttigieg. He is the American Secretary of Transportation. He's a government official. And he accidentally acknowledged that, like, yeah, McKinsey fixes prices.
Shadowy and parasitic consulting firm at the heart of nearly every industry in America.
Oh, he
McKinsey
read the
claims to
takeaway, but he
operate
mistimed
on a no
it.
policy, free from a driving ideology or
Hmm.
bias. But we tracked their history and broke down their worldview, and
No ideology, eh? Neither left nor right, but a secret third thing. In parentheses, far right. It's not actually that, you know, like, Dutch Center Party memes aside. What's actually going on here is the whole no ideology is sort of a hint at, like, our ideology is just business interests, right? Which is ideological, but it's much more convenient to say that we are not motivated by ideology. The real ideology that they're motivated by is a pro-capitalist ideology. They work with businesses, so that is the interest. Those are the political interests that they favor. My ideology is money. Scylla SSBM, welcome to chat. And yes, that is the guiding principle of McKinsey Consulting.
it places the consulting industry as secret agents in the war on working people.
The classroom.
So what do
Very
consultants even do?
Toucan Samus based. We love some wordplay here. So here they're showing
Okay, but what do they actually do?
they showed some flowery text there. A lot of consulting firms and white-collar workplaces and firms will have these blurbs where they say, like, strive for excellence, solve problems. And, like, they'll try to describe what they do with as little actual substance as possible. And in cases like this, it ends up being they don't actually say what they do because all they're using is corpo buzzwords. The more shady a company, or the more morally reprehensible the things they do, the more they will use those words. Mission statements? Yeah, there we go. Mission statements. That's what I'm thinking of.
When I first
Here we have a
applied
video
and
from them.
received an offer, I really had no idea what a BA does. The amazing thing is that what we do varies.
Communicate, present, model, plan, problem solve.
Be ambitious.
Yeah, see, here we
and
go.
find ways we can double our current rate of innovation.
No, but what do they actually do?
Wow,
I
innovation.
had to ask some experts.
It legit sounds like an ad for, like, an Apple product, or even in some cases like a parody of the shit Apple would say, where they're just transparently not saying anything, you know? At least that, to me, that's what it feels like. Nice super wave dash. Also, kind of wacky that I punished a super wave dash. Fox moment.
To get a straight answer.
Well, in an ideal world, consultants add their brain power, to any company.
That was Mike Forsyth, a New York Times journalist and author of When McKinsey Comes to Town.
They come in as outsiders, look at a problem in a new way.
Oh no, I tried to punish it again.
Advice.
Consultants claim to help organizations solve problems that they would not be able to solve themselves.
This is Garrison Lovely, a former McKinsey employee turned whistleblower and journalist.
Whether that's entering a new market, reducing costs, helping a government achieve its mission better.
That's the idealized version. In the non-idealized version, the advice they give is bad advice, or the client they're working with is not a good actor.
So where did this lucrative problem-solving industry even come from? McKinsey was founded
So what consulting firms do, basically, is they give you bad advice, or they give you good advice on how to do bad things. That's what consulting is. Functionally speaking, but really, like, all it is, like, consulting is just we are giving companies advice on how to do X, Y, and Z. It's just like a lot of companies use it as sort of a mechanism of, like, I don't know, plausible deniability, so they can kind of deny responsibility for the idea of laying people off or breaking a strike or whatever, and they can say, actually, it was the consulting firm's idea, or something like that. They sort of outsource their ideas here.
right after a period of historic corporate.
I always point people to Mission Statement by Weird AI for an entertaining example. Yeah, that that's certainly a thing that's liable to happen is these sort of mission statements, especially when they don't like want to outright disclose what they do. Sometimes they'll have them be written by AI. And I'm dead.
Corporate mergers. From 1895 to 1904, 1,800 companies were crunched into just 157 megacorporations, including some familiar ones like US Steel, Nabisco, General Electric, and AT&T. You might also remember what happened in 1929. So, in 1933, the government passed the Glass-Steagall Act, which stopped banks from speculation, which is basically gambling with the money regular people put in their bank accounts. But
it was basically preventing businesses from sharing information with each other about what they were doing, and so they couldn't standardize practices as much. Consultants were a way to get around this, where they would work for one company and figure out what they're doing and like do this for a bunch of different.
Yeah, so basically, these consulting firms are the way that companies realize their class interests. You see, the capital class are very class conscious. They are extremely aware of what their class interests are at any given moment, and they are also fully aware that those class interests stand in contradiction to both the human interests and the interests of their workers. You know, so, but the law made it illegal, basically, for them to get together and sort of conspire with each other directly on how to best realize those interests, how to crack down on pro-labor sentiments. So they went to third parties. If they go to a third party, now they're not directly consulting with each other. Now it just so happens that the same consulting company that every single company talks to says the same thing to every single company, and then you get the same result anyway. Very convoluted, but it's just like adding another link in the chain, so to speak. Also, I don't know if this person is a Samus main or a Link main or like a dual main, but either way, it seems like they like to use the projectile characters. And I respect it. I probably need some practice against these guys as Fox, so I'm down. Let's keep going.
Companies within the same industry and help these companies like behave more or less the same way and standardize.
In 1951, General Motors hired McKinsey to conduct the first ever study of executive compensation. The project was led by this guy,
I'm player one. Okay.
He noticed that laborers after World War II, their wages were rising faster than management, and went to companies and said, "Hey, did you know that?"
That's actually really interesting, and I think that's good too. Like in the 1950s, obviously a lot of flaws with economies around the world and America, especially segregation, Jim Crow, etc., etc. But one of the things that policymakers actually did very correctly in the 1950s was progressive tax brackets and the structuring of like wages versus profits and capital gains and things like that. There was sort of the beginnings of a social democratic framework where, you know, wages could be like collectively bargained for. Unions were pretty prominent before the Cold War rhetoric really ramped up and union crackdowns became like the prerogative of the state as much as the prerogative of corporations. And yeah, you know, it was like an okay time for workers, although, you know, that being prefaced with like in America, it was white workers that it was an okay time for and not minority workers. But bottom line is, the capital class was sort of being caught up to by the working class in some ways, and they decided, uh-oh, that ain't good. We got to fix that. And so they got to work for once. You know, they'll work very hard at finding ways that they don't have to work. But not any other time, funnily enough.
Your workers are actually getting raises more than you are, and they were shocked by this and just pioneered the field of executive compensation consulting.
At the time of the study, the average CEO was paid about 20 times his typical worker salary.
That's
now,
still a lot,
averages hit
by the
between
way.
2 and 300, with some outliers approaching 2,000. Thanks, McKinsey.
Their management labor.
Yeah, it was basically like it's long story short was the project of how do we justify paying ourselves obscenely large amounts of money? I know, we'll just hire this other company to say, hey, we're professionals, and actually we think you should give the rich people even more money. That's what the experts say. And then the board would be like, well, there you have it. Time to give ourselves and the CEO a shit ton of money. It is raining. I see. Let's go back a few seconds.
Outliers approaching 2,000. Thanks, McKinsey.
They're management consultants. Since they were founded in the 1920s, they've been working with management. There is no equivalent McKinsey, for labor.
When it comes to labor, they've got one MO.
Layoffs.
If they're not laying
Yep.
people off, they're making other cuts and recommendations that totally hurt workers and consumers.
A very common thing is the CEO wants to enter a new market or lay off a bunch of people
smash the
or
guy.
close down some division. McKinsey will do a bunch of analysis and they'll come up with like all these clever seeming reasons why it makes sense to do the thing. And this is a way for the CEO or whoever else hired McKinsey to justify the decision.
In 2005, the average annual salary for a Walmart associate was roughly
You're getting shagged.
$17,500.
Its employee costs were going up because, associates, as Walmart calls them, were staying longer and longer and longer, but they didn't see a really big boost in productivity. So McKinsey came on board to help reduce healthcare expenses and to also try to trim benefits. And one of the findings and recommendations
In a very basic sense, there's going to be a lot of individual examples of this. This is them using McKinsey to cut wages and benefits, as well as cut staff as well, to lay people off, things like that. Ultimately, McKinsey and other consultants like them, but especially McKinsey, is the vehicle by which the owning class realizes their class interests. They're like, hey, how do we optimally pursue our bottom line here? And McKinsey's like, well, we workshopped it. Here's what you should do. And it almost always is a policy that hurts either workers, consumers, or both. And reliably that hurts low-income people, because that's pretty beneficial to big companies.
recommendations was to hire more part-time workers because they don't have that burden of having all those benefits.
McKinsey also recommended that Walmart consider reducing its overall investment in profit sharing and 401k programs, lower its company-paid life insurance coverage, and move employees to consumer-driven health plans. Walmart wasn't the only client that used McKinsey to try and save money.
In the 1990s, McKinsey came on board with Disneyland, and one of the areas they looked at was overhauling the maintenance program. And mind you, you have to keep in mind, this is a place that had a spotless record.
At that time, Disneyland had lots of mechanics maintaining rides. They made the rounds all day, tightening screws and bolts as needed and checking key safety features like lap bars.
Quinn Nyla 4, welcome to the stream. Thank you very much for the follow. Hello, how are you? I'm doing all right. How about yourself? Just watching this nice video from More Perfect Union about this consulting firm and how it has made basically everybody's life a lot worse, especially in America. This is also one of the things that I meant when I said that, like, a lot of the work that these people do, never mind bad for the workers' interests, it's just bad for humanity at large. First of all, because workers are the majority of humanity, but then also because, like, they mentioned Disney, this Disney park had a spotless record, and then McKinsey and Disney looked at that and they were like, nah, we need to fix that, you know, because we were, I don't know, they were spending more than they would have liked on maintenance. Like, one of the only instances, like, cartoonishly so, where I've seen them say, hang on, nobody's getting hurt. Our maintenance is so good that our park is one of the safest environments in the world from a, like, equipment standard. Let's see if we can change that. You know, legitimately, some of this stuff seems like it'd be great material for pieces in the onion.
So the idea, again, cut maintenance costs, move the maintenance crew to mostly work the graveyard shift at night.
The ride mechanic sent Disney multiple warnings of his safety concerns. McKinsey asked him why lap bars on a roller coaster were inspected daily when records showed they never failed. He replied, the reason they don't fail...
That's, yeah, I was gonna say, like, why do you inspect them all the time if they never fail? It's like, what? It's like, why do you think, dumbass? They never fail because they inspect them all the time and make sure that they don't fail. I can't wait for this to go wrong.
Is because we check them every night. It's like a pilot saying, hey, we haven't crashed in a while, let's just skip the pre-flight. Disney never responded to his complaints, and
basically
he was later
is
fired.
like that.
Not long after this, a child was seriously injured after falling out of a ride because of a lap bar issue. He never walked or talked again and died a few years later.
Well, that's fucking
Another serious
grim.
accident occurred when an untrained supervisor docked a riverboat.
It's just extremely dangerous. You know, you need to have very well-trained people to do this. Apparently the wood, you know, in the dock was rotted, and the whole thing just shot out like shrapnel and wound up, you know, killing one person and injuring somebody else.
And another person was...
And that's why you do your inspections. Boeing strategy? Yeah, this is the Boeing strategy. Hey, and believe it or not, since you mentioned Boeing, they probably got this strategy from this consulting firm that this video is talking about. McKinsey, this consulting company, basically gets paid by companies around the world to give them shitty ideas that cut a lot of corners and save a lot of money, right? And I will bet you so much money, I would bet a lot of money on this, that Boeing is one of the companies that McKinsey Consulting has worked with, and that's probably one of the pieces of advice that they gave is along the lines of, like, stop doing so many inspections. You know, your shit's so safe, right? You don't need to do all those inspections. You know, just as a way to cut costs. Cover high, never die. Ooh. Nice up smash. I respect the attempt. Ooh. Nice B reverse.
When wheels failed on the Thunder Mountain roller coaster. The cited causes of all of these accidents were staffing and maintenance.
This is not the Disney that many people grew up with, and they all happened after McKinsey came on board.
But did McKinsey face any consequences for their bad advice?
McKinsey escapes accountability in a way because they are behind the scenes.
Yep.
It's all about secrecy, you know, with them. Our advice is to you, and it's confidential. If you guys do great, wonderful, you take all the credit. If you screw up and things go bad, it's on you, it's not us.
If the project fails.
Yeah, that's definitely one part of the like plausible deniability introduced by consulting groups like that. And then the other part of it is that basically because there's like an avoidance of accountability going on both ends, it's basically shitty safety practices and like really scummy employment practices and exploitative business becomes the norm, like, well, even more so than would otherwise be the case. And basically, even if government wanted to enforce regulations more strictly, they would have a very hard time doing so because of how much of the economy is affected. Most companies that go to, like, McKinsey, because McKinsey is one of the biggest consulting firms, a lot of the companies that go there are, like, mega corporations, you know? They're the biggest of the biggest companies. And so it's like, this shit is everywhere, you know? And it's not by accident either. It's like a concerted push to cut corners and stuff like that. You know, I could invoke Marx and the whole tendency of the rate of profits to fall, blah blah, but that's overly theoretical, I think. Just to explain that, like, companies love to save a quick buck, and they'll fire employees, they'll make pay worse, they'll cut benefits, they'll cut safety regulations to achieve that.
A decision ends up being bad. It's like, well, clearly you hired the best consulting firm, so it must have been something else.
There's this symbiotic relationship between McKinsey and their clients.
Well, they might just be about to explain that here.
All McKinsey did was make recommendations.
Yeah, there we go.
And all the client did was follow them.
Plausible deniability.
He did it!
It's a way to cover your ass, which is a very common expression in the business world.
This system is great for short-term profits and shareholders, but not so great if you care about jobs or safety. So what happens when you apply this mindset to the industries that we literally can't live without? That's when things start to get even darker.
Healthcare is pretty much McKinsey's bread and butter.
Bread prices.
Hospitals, for sure. Insurance companies, managed care companies, pharmaceutical companies. Top 5 McKinsey clients would be companies like Johnson & Johnson, and the big managed care insurance company Anthem, Aetna, Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Let me say that again.
Yeah.
McKinsey's biggest money earner is our healthcare system, and it's also where they've done some of the most damage. In 2018, McKinsey was contracted with the nonprofit hospital Providence Medical to design a program to get more patients to pay their medical bills.
Providence Hospital is a tax-exempt hospital. They're required to provide free care to poor people. And they were looking for any way to cut costs, and they turned to McKinsey to find a way to convince poor people to pay bills, even if in many cases they actually were not required to pay those bills.
McKinsey literally wrote a script for hospital staff to read to these patients. Staff were not allowed to take no for an answer and were told to take just $3 if that was all the patient had.
Shout outs to high pressure sales.
In some cases, they would refer to a third-party debt collection agency. It would, destroy these people's credit rating.
And now Providence is being sued while McKinsey is once again not.
That's high pressure sales is pretty common in America. It's not as common outside of America, and like the door-to-door sales particularly, but like a lot of the stuff that high pressure salespeople do in the US is literally just illegal. And the reason that they do it is because they know that the government's never going to catch them or enforce the rules, even if they are caught. Like there have been a lot of instances of like, oh, there was a huge scandal with this company and they went to court over it. But then ultimately all it ends with is like I don't know, some civil damages and like, yeah, don't do it again, I guess. And then they instantly go back to doing it again.
not being held accountable, legally, financially, or otherwise. And while they're working for private sector clients, they're also working for the government agencies that are meant to be regulating them. Two more McKinsey clients were Philip Morris and Juul.
McKinsey was also working for the FDA office that regulated tobacco.
I spent my jump at some point.
They have these clients. And you see the reporting in our book that said that actually the people at the FDA did not know that McKinsey was advising the tobacco companies. And this is the same, with...
Yeah, of course, as is the case for a lot of business practices and companies that get, so big. A lot of the business world is very incestuous in the sense that, like, there's conflicts of interest. It's like, oh, I know a guy that knows a guy at this company, and they're, like, working with each other through all these back channels. There's all sorts of nepotistic deals going on. And a lot of that is made possible by McKinsey Consulting.
Juul, this is when the FDA was cracking down on cigarettes. And pharma, the same thing. And most infamously, they're working for opioid makers, especially Purdue Pharma.
Conflicts of interest are the name of the game for McKinsey. They're like business class mercenaries. They'll fight for any and every side that will pay them, and sometimes even ones that don't. In 1997, the state of Illinois was trying...
And you know why they do that? You know why McKinsey works for free sometimes? Because they're also part of the business class. The business class is way better at sharing their wealth than society at large. And so, to realize the class interest that they have, a lot of times they'll just work for each other for free. Because it gets them richer. Even if they don't technically get paid for doing certain kinds of work, getting paid that way is for poor people. My stock portfolio is going to look real nice as a result of this, and shit like that.
To reduce welfare spending. They needed help, and McKinsey generously offered their services for free.
One of the tricks McKinsey does, they will often come in and do pro bono work. And this is often a way just to kind of get in the door.
Once their foot was in the door, they were called back by some of the same state officials 20 years later to help, this time with restructuring Medicaid. And this time, it wouldn't be for free.
Oh, they work for the
Around
state
the
too.
same
Great,
time,
lovely.
Illinois hit some budget troubles. It was found that they were in about $1 million of debt to basic medical services while sending $75 million to McKinsey. It was also found that under McKinsey's project, the state was paying $63 billion to 7 private insurers, 4 of whom were also McKinsey clients. According to the Illinois comptroller, this taxpayer money was spent with less oversight than a purchase of paper clips. Like,
holy shit, they work in my country too? Yeah, they do. They work all around the world. This is the like capital is truly international. Like their interests know no borders. And like it really does seem for like how much money McKinsey gets from governments, from companies on this shit, it really does just seem like we make the world worse. Like that's just what they do. God damn.
a vampire, McKinsey got themselves invited in with pro bono work, and now they were sucking Illinois dry.
They're on all sides of the food chain, you know, in the healthcare industry.
Hey,
and
you
there's
said
so much money there.
On their own website right now, McKinsey admits that healthcare in Illinois should be improved, specifically around opioid use. So cool that the solution to these problems they have actively helped create is bold collaborative action. It's like if someone came over to your house and used all your dishes and then was like, oh, according to my research, someone should probably do the dishes.
Yeah, very true.
Done, man.
Once
I don't
they
know what
sink their
these
teeth
cultural
into our
references are, and I
governments,
might
they
need to
stay
mute them in the
for as
VOD
long as they can.
or something.
They make sure these agencies don't even remember a time before them.
You just end up relying on these people who are
Yep.
paid multiple times what a civil servant will be paid and aren't really accountable to the public in a serious way and may just come through for a few months at a time and then move on to something else. And so you don't build up this expertise and you just don't have like this capacity to do things that states need to do.
They do all this while hiding behind the fact that they don't make the decisions.
This guy, Richard Elder, was like, look, we don't do policy, we just do execution. We're not here to make choices about what policy.
By the way, today an American bomber flew over my home. Really? That's interesting. Sometimes American military planes fly over my house, but that's because I live near the DC area. There's a lot of military bases and stuff where I live. You get military helicopters. Sometimes the president's helicopter will fly like over my house. Sometimes like a cargo plane will fly over, military cargo plane. Wonder what it was doing? I don't know. Probably some routine stuff. Am I live? I am. Ooh. No.
These are
Okay.
good. All the values
there we go.
About doing right by our clients, having an obligation to dissent, but that doesn't mean the dissent is going to go anywhere. It just means you're not going to get fired for speaking out.
A former McKinsey employee told Michael that a manager would advise new recruits to wedge yourself in and spread like an amoeba. Once in, you should spread yourself in the organization and do everything. In other words, act like a Trojan horse. He was talking about their clients, but as we've seen, the McKinsey amoeba has wedged its way into every part of American life. So what should we do about it? Well, the DOJ is investigating their work on opioids criminally for the first time, and some politicians have even talked about banning McKinsey from federal contracts.
That's not going to go anywhere.
Most of these problems aren't even unique to McKinsey. If we just banned...
Yeah, I was going to say, every consulting firm just does this, by the way. McKinsey's just the biggest one. Every consulting firm, fundamentally, is just this. Damn, this guy's clearly a DK main. Big respect to him for sticking with such a bad character and making it work. Oh. I need forward smash more. Nice try.
One consulting firm from federal contracts, the others would likely just fill in the gaps.
The reality
Yeah,
is
I don't know
there
why I
are
did that.
companies called Bain and Boston Consulting Group and Deloitte and Accenture, and they are offering kind of the same product. And I don't think that the results would be that different.
Ultimately, we need to untangle the dependency on consulting McKinsey has fostered in our government.
Things are set up in such a way where if you just like cut off the consulting firms, I don't think you can build up that capacity overnight. Like this is like a kind of a generational long project, and I think that requires governments like paying people more and creating workplaces that are more appealing, as well as like just a philosophical change of like public-private partnerships are not the default best way to go, and government should actually learn how to do things well.
That's true.
Again, we've done it before.
It didn't used to always be this way. You know, the public-private partnership, pretty recent thing, you know? Governments used to do a lot of stuff in-house, but now they don't anymore. They actually just don't. It's kind of crazy the degree to which the like public infrastructure just relies on the private sector now, you know?
And what about the army of young MBA grads ready to keep the consulting industry marching on for another 100 years?
I
I
wonder.
would tell them that these organizations will promise you that you can do work that is exciting and prestigious and improves the world with smart people that pays well. You can have it all. And I would just tell them that that's not true. I think I'm really much happier than the cohort of people that I worked with at McKinsey, even though I make like so much less money than them. And my life and career is like less stable and predictable. But you have privilege by being in this position, and you have some kind of opportunity and I think to some extent an obligation to use that to actually make the world a better place. And I think you will end up being happier for it.
Thanks for watching The Classroom. We're always looking to do more stories like this, exposing the shadowy corporations and economic systems that impact our daily lives. What other stories do you want to see? Sound off in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.
All right, so that was the video. Ended up being full of more examples than I thought there would be. I think ultimately the most useful thing I can get out of that is that like when you see insert consulting group like that, that's what kind of work that they do. They give advice to giant companies on how to be evil douchebags. And that's like, that's how companies realize their class interests, because now it's actually, trust busting is kind of a thing. It's not 100% legal for companies to sort of directly consult with each other.